The old alien walked slowly into the lecture hall. His name was Keth Varan, and he had lived for more than 200 standard years. His blue skin had faded to a pale gray with age. His 4 eyes, once sharp and bright, now carried a tired look that never seemed to go away. He used a ceremonial cane to help him walk, though everyone knew he did not really need it. The cane was made from the bone of a creature from his home world. It was a symbol of his service in the military. The lecture hall was enormous. It could hold more than 1,000 students, and today it was completely full. Young cadets from dozens of different species sat in the curved rows of seats. They wore the uniforms of the Grand Military Academy of Veltharis, the most famous war school in the entire Galactic Coalition. Keth Varan reached the center of the stage and looked up at the young faces watching him. He saw Drethkai warriors with their armored skin. He saw Yilmari scouts with their large, sensitive ears. He saw Korath soldiers with their 4 powerful arms. All of them were young. All of them thought they understood war. They did not understand anything. A young Velthari female sat in the front row. Her name was Yira, and she had the eager look of someone who had never seen real combat. She raised her hand before Keth Varan could even speak. "Honored veteran," she said. "Why are we studying humans today? They are our trading partners now. They make beautiful music and interesting art. They seem so peaceful. Why should we learn about fighting them?" Several other cadets nodded in agreement. Some of them even smiled, as if the idea of humans being dangerous was funny. Keth Varan did not smile. He stood very still for a long moment, and the room grew quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried to every corner of the hall. "How many of you have met a human?" he asked. About half the hands in the room went up. "And how many of you found them threatening?" Almost all the hands went down. Only 2 or 3 students kept their hands raised, and they looked uncertain. Keth Varan nodded slowly. "That is because the humans you met chose to show you their gentle side. They chose to smile at you, to trade with you, to share their culture with you. They made a choice." He paused and let his words settle over the room. "I was a soldier in the Terran Contact Wars," he continued. "I served under Commander Zethril in the 4th Assault Battalion. When we started that war, our battalion had 800 soldiers. We were well-trained, well-equipped, and confident. We believed humans were a minor species. They had only one home system. They had no great fleet. They had no history of galactic warfare." Keth Varan's grip tightened on his cane. "Do you know how many soldiers survived from my battalion by the end of the war?" The cadets were silent. 3, Keth Varan said. 3 soldiers out of 800. I am one of them. The other 2 cannot speak about what happened. Their minds never recovered. The mood in the lecture hall changed instantly. The smiles disappeared. The whispered conversations stopped. Every eye was fixed on the old veteran. "I am here today because the Academy believes you should understand what you might face if peace ever fails," Keth Varan said. "I hope you never have to fight humans. I hope the peace lasts forever. But if it does not, you need to know what kind of enemy they can become." He walked slowly to one side of the stage, and a holographic display activated behind him. It showed a star map with human territory marked in blue and Coalition territory marked in green. 40 years ago, the Coalition looked at this map and saw opportunity, he said. Human space was small. Their population was only 8 billion, spread across a dozen colonies. We had trillions of citizens and thousands of worlds. Our technology was more advanced. Our ships were faster and stronger. Every calculation told us that conquering human space would be quick and easy. He touched a control, and the map changed. Red marks appeared across both territories, showing battle sites. The war lasted 4 years, Keth Varan said. In those 4 years, the Coalition lost more soldiers than in the previous 300 years of conflict combined. We lost entire fleets. We lost worlds that had stood for centuries. And in the end, we did not defeat the humans. They defeated us. Cadet Yira raised her hand again. Honored veteran. How is that possible? The numbers do not make sense. How could such a small species defeat the entire Coalition? Keth Varan turned to face her directly. That is exactly what I am here to explain. The numbers did not make sense to us either. Our generals could not understand what was happening. Our strategists could not predict human behavior. Our soldiers could not match their will to fight. He deactivated the holographic display and stood in the center of the stage again. Humans are not stronger than us. They are not faster than us. They do not have better technology than us. But they have something else. Something that makes them the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. The room was completely silent now. Not a single cadet moved. When humans fight, they do not fight as individuals, Kethvoran said. They fight as one being with billions of bodies. They share information instantly. They adapt to any situation. They sacrifice themselves for each other without hesitation. And most importantly, they never stop. They never give up. They will keep fighting until they win, or until every single one of them is dead. He looked across the rows of young faces and saw fear beginning to grow in their eyes. Good. Fear might keep them alive someday. I am going to tell you about the siege of Outpost Mira 7, he said. I am going to tell you what I saw with my own eyes. And when I am finished, you will understand why the coalition surrendered unconditionally to a species with 1/10 our numbers and 1/100th our territory. Kethvoran took a deep breath. The memories were coming back now, as fresh and terrible as the day they were made. It began with silence, he said. We expected the humans to surrender. We expected fear and weakness. Instead, we found only silence. And in that silence, death was waiting for us. The lecture had begun, and the cadets would never look at humans the same way again. Kethvoran closed his eyes for a moment. The memories of Mira 7 never truly left him. They lived in his mind like ghosts, waiting to appear whenever he let his guard down. Now he had to bring those ghosts into the light and show them to these young cadets. Outpost Mira 7 was a mining station, he began. It sat on a small moon in a system near the border of human space. The moon had valuable minerals that the humans needed for their ships. Our commanders decided it would be an easy target, a quick victory to show the humans that resistance was pointless. He opened his eyes and looked at the silent cadets. We arrived with 20,000 soldiers. The humans had fewer than 1,000 defenders. Our ships surrounded the moon and blocked all escape routes. Our commanders sent a message demanding surrender. The humans did not reply. Kethvoran remembered standing on the transport ship, looking at the gray surface of the moon through the viewing window. He had been young then, barely 50 years old. He had believed what his commanders told him. He had believed the war would be over quickly. We landed on the surface and approached the outpost, he continued. It was built into the rock of the moon, a network of tunnels and chambers. Our sensors showed no movement, no defensive positions, no weapons pointed at us. The commanders believed the humans were hiding, too afraid to fight. He shook his head slowly. We entered the outpost through the main entrance. The first 100 soldiers went in, and we followed behind them. The corridors were empty. The lights were on. Everything looked normal. Some soldiers even laughed, saying the humans had run away. The cadets leaned forward in their seats. They could sense that something terrible was coming. Then the lights went out, Kethvoran said. Every light in the outpost went dark at the same moment. We were in complete blackness. Our soldiers activated their night vision equipment, but something was wrong. The humans had filled the air with a fine dust that scattered our sensor beams. We could see only a few feet in any direction. He remembered the panic that spread through the unit. Soldiers bumping into each other in the dark. Officers shouting orders that no one could follow. And then the screaming started. The first deaths were silent, Kethvoran said. Soldiers simply disappeared. One moment they were standing beside you. The next moment they were gone. Then we started finding bodies. Throats cut. Necks broken. Killed without making a sound. Cadet Yira's face had gone pale. Other cadets looked sick. But Kethvoran continued. The humans moved through the darkness like they could see perfectly. Later we learned that they had memorized every corridor, every room, every turn. They knew their home, and they used that knowledge to kill us. He described the chaos that followed. Soldiers firing their weapons at shadows. Friendly fire killing more coalition troops than the enemy. Officers trying to retreat, but finding their escape routes blocked. The humans had sealed doors behind them, trapping them in sections of the outpost. We learned later that the humans called this kind of fighting by a special name, Kethvaran said. They called it guerrilla warfare. It is a type of combat where a small force uses surprise, knowledge of terrain, and psychological attacks to defeat a larger enemy. Humans have been practicing this kind of fighting against each other for thousands of years. We were not their first victims. Af. He paused and touched his chest, where an old scar was hidden beneath his clothing. That is when I first saw Daniel Carter, he said. Sergeant Daniel Carter of the Terran Marine Corps. I did not know his name then. I only knew that he appeared from the darkness like a spirit of death. Kethvaran described the moment in detail. He had been crouching in a corridor with 3 other soldiers, trying to find a way out. They thought they were safe. They thought the enemy was somewhere else. Carter came from above, Kethvaran said. He had been hiding in a maintenance shaft in the ceiling. He dropped down behind us without making a sound. Before any of us could react, he had killed 2 soldiers with his knife. The 3rd soldier turned to shoot him, but Carter was faster. He grabbed the soldier's weapon and used it against him. The old veteran's voice became quiet. Then he looked at me. I was on the ground, too shocked to move. My weapon was out of reach. I knew I was going to die. Carter stood over me with his knife in his hand. Blood dripped from the blade, and he just looked at me. Kethvaran remembered those eyes. Human eyes were strange to most species. They had whites around the colored part, which made it easy to see where they were looking. Carter's eyes had been calm, not angry, not excited. Just calm, like a predator deciding whether to eat or walk away. He did not kill me, Kethvaran said. He looked at me for 3 seconds, and then he disappeared back into the darkness. I never understood why he let me live. Maybe he wanted me to spread fear among the other soldiers. Maybe he felt I was not a threat. Maybe he simply did not care enough to waste the effort. He turned to face the cadets directly. That moment taught me something important about humans. They are not mindless killers. They make choices. Every act of violence is a decision. Carter chose to kill my comrades. He chose to let me live. Both choices were equally easy for him. Kethvaran described the rest of the first day at Mira 7. Of the first 100 soldiers who entered the outpost, only 12 made it back out. The commanders sent in more troops. They suffered the same fate. By the end of the first day, the coalition had lost over 2,000 soldiers without ever seeing more than a glimpse of the enemy. Our commanders could not understand what was happening, Kethvaran said. They kept sending more soldiers, believing that numbers would eventually win. But the humans adapted to everything we tried. When we brought lights, they destroyed the power generators. When we brought thermal sensors, they wore suits that masked their heat. When we brought poison gas, they sealed themselves in protected areas and waited for the gas to clear. He spread his arms wide. The siege of Mira 7 lasted for 30 days. 30 days of darkness and death. The humans never tried to escape. They never asked for help. They simply kept fighting, killing our soldiers one by one, until our commanders finally ordered a retreat. Kethvaran let that truth hang in the air. 20,000 coalition soldiers attacked 1,000 human defenders. After 30 days, the coalition retreated with fewer than 8,000 survivors. The humans lost fewer than 200, and they still held their outpost. He looked at the shocked faces of the cadets. That was our first real battle against humans. And that was when we began to understand how badly we had miscalculated. But we did not learn the lesson. We thought Mira 7 was a special case, a lucky victory for the humans. So we kept fighting. And they kept teaching us. Kethvaran paused and took a drink of water from a glass on the podium. His throat was dry from speaking. But the memories made it worse. Even after 40 years, Mira 7 still haunted his dreams. Tomorrow I will tell you about what makes humans truly dangerous, he said. It is not their weapons or their tactics. It is something much deeper. Something in their very nature that makes them the most terrifying enemy the galaxy has ever known. The cadets sat in stunned silence, their earlier dismissiveness completely gone. They were beginning to understand. The next day, the lecture hall was even more crowded than before. Word had spread across the academy about the veteran stories. Cadets who had not been assigned to attend now stood in the back, hoping to hear more about the humans. Keth Voran walked onto the stage with the same slow, careful steps as before. He looked at the expanded audience and nodded slightly. Fear was the first step toward wisdom. And these young soldiers needed to be wise. Yesterday I told you about Mira 7, he said. Today I will explain why we lost there. Not just the tactics or the terrain, the deeper reason. The thing that makes humans fundamentally different from any other species we have encountered. He walked slowly across the stage, his cane tapping against the floor. Every intelligent species develops based on its home world. The Drethkai evolved on a heavy gravity planet, which gave them strong bodies and thick skin. The Yilmari evolved in dense forests, which gave them keen senses and quick reflexes. Each species carries the mark of their origin. Kethvoran stopped and faced the cadets. Humans evolved on a world called Earth. It is a beautiful planet, covered with water and green plants and countless animals. But here is what you must understand. On Earth, humans were not the apex predators. They were not the strongest or the fastest. They did not have claws or fangs or venom. They were soft, fragile creatures, surrounded by dangers. He let that information settle into the minds of his audience. So how did humans become the dominant species on their world? How did these weak, slow, fragile beings survive against animals that could kill them with ease? A cadet in the middle rows raised his hand. They made tools and weapons? That is part of it, Kethvoran said. But tools alone do not explain human success. Many animals use tools. The real answer is something else entirely. He activated the holographic display, showing an image of early humans hunting a large animal on an open plain. Humans developed two abilities that no other species on their world possessed. The first was persistence hunting. Humans cannot run as fast as most prey animals, but they can run farther. They have a cooling system based on sweat that allows them to keep moving, while other animals overheat and collapse. Human hunters would chase an animal for hours, sometimes days, until it simply fell down from exhaustion. Then they would kill it. The cadets murmured among themselves. This was not how most species hunted. The second ability was even more important, Keth Voran continued. Humans are social creatures, in a way that few other species match. They share information freely. They cooperate without needing direct genetic relationships. A human will risk death to save a stranger simply because that stranger is also human. He changed the display to show human soldiers working together. When I fought at Mira 7, I saw these abilities in action. The humans never tired. They fought day after day without rest. We learned later that they were taking turns sleeping in shifts. But to us, it seemed like they never stopped. Our soldiers needed long recovery periods between combat. The humans did not. Keth Voran remembered the exhaustion that had settled into his bones during the siege. The constant fear had drained him more than any physical effort. But the humans had stayed sharp and alert throughout. Now let me tell you about human biology during combat, he said. Humans have a chemical response to danger that they call adrenaline. When threatened, their bodies release this chemical into their blood. It increases their strength, their speed, and their tolerance for pain. It allows them to keep fighting even with wounds that would stop any other species. He described a scene he had witnessed during the war. A human soldier had been shot through the chest. By all medical logic, she should have collapsed immediately. Instead, she continued fighting for several more minutes, killing 4 coalition soldiers before finally falling. The medics who examined her body later could not believe she had remained conscious, let alone combat effective. Adrenaline explains part of it, Keth Voran said. But there is something else. Something psychological. Humans have the ability to override their own survival instincts through sheer willpower. They can choose to keep fighting when every part of their body is telling them to stop. They can walk into certain death if they believe the cause is worth it. He paused and looked at the cadets with his 4 tired eyes. Most species have a breaking point. Push them hard enough, hurt them badly enough, and they will surrender or flee. Their instincts take over and force them to preserve themselves. Humans have this instinct too, but they can ignore it. They can push through fear and pain and exhaustion by simply deciding to do so. Cadet Yira raised her hand. Honored veteran. Surely every species can show courage in battle. Why are humans different? A fair question. Kethvoran replied. The difference is scale. Individual courage exists in every species. But humans display this courage collectively. As a society, during the Terran contact wars, the human population voted on whether to continue fighting or seek peace. They knew the cost would be enormous. They knew millions of them might die. They voted to keep fighting with an 89% majority. He let that number hang in the air. 89% of the human population chose to risk death rather than accept terms they considered unjust. That is not individual courage. That is something far more powerful. That is a species-wide commitment to resist. Kethvoran changed the display again, showing images of human improvised weapons captured during the war. Let me tell you about human creativity in warfare, he said. When we destroyed their weapons factories, they built new weapons in hidden locations. When we blocked their supply lines, they made weapons from mining equipment and construction materials. When we took away their technology, they fought with knives and rocks and their bare hands. He pointed to an image of a crude explosive device. This weapon was made by a human engineer named Kevin Marsh. It was built from a water heater, some mining chemicals, and parts from a broken radio. It destroyed one of our armored vehicles and killed 12 soldiers. Marsh had no military training. He was a civilian water system technician. But when his home was threatened, he became a weapon himself. The cadets stared at the crude device with new respect and fear. The coalition's greatest mistake was believing that war had rules, Kethvoran said. We fought with honor codes and established conventions. Soldiers fought soldiers. Civilians were left alone. Certain weapons were forbidden. Certain tactics were considered beneath us. He shook his head slowly. Humans have no such illusions. Their history is filled with total wars where entire populations fought against each other. They have burned cities, poisoned water supplies, and killed millions of their own kind over ideas and beliefs. They know what war truly is. They know it is not a game with rules. It is survival. Kethvoran turned off the display and stood in silence for a moment. When you fight humans, you are not fighting soldiers. You are fighting an entire species. Every human becomes a potential enemy. Every piece of their technology becomes a potential weapon. Every moment of peace becomes a potential trap. They will not stop until they win, or until every last one of them is dead. And even then, they might find a way to keep fighting. He looked at the frightened faces of the cadets. That is why we lost the war. Not because of any single battle or any single mistake. We lost because we were fighting a species that refused to accept defeat. And against an enemy like that, superior numbers and technology mean nothing. The lecture hall was silent. The cadets understood now why their teachers had brought this old veteran to speak. This was not history. This was a warning. Tomorrow I will tell you about the day a human showed me mercy, Kethvoran said, and you will learn why that moment terrified me more than any battle. He walked slowly off the stage, leaving the cadets to think about what they had heard. On the third day, Kethvoran noticed that some cadets had brought recording devices to the lecture hall. They wanted to preserve his words, to share them with others who could not attend. He did not object. The more beings who understood the truth about humans, the better. Today I will tell you about the moment that changed my understanding of humans forever, he began. It did not happen during battle. It happened after one. He moved slowly to the center of the stage and stood without his cane for the first time. His old body trembled slightly, but he wanted them to see him clearly. The siege of Mira 7 eventually ended. The coalition withdrew, but the war continued on other fronts. My unit was sent to a world called New Cyprus, a human farming colony that our forces had recently captured. Our mission was to hold the planet against human counterattacks. Keth Voran remembered the green fields of New Cyprus. It had been a beautiful world, covered with crops that the humans had brought from Earth. For a few days, it had almost felt peaceful. The humans came to take back their colony. They landed in small groups across the planet, avoiding our main forces and striking at weak points. Our commanders did not take them seriously at first. There were only a few hundred humans against our garrison of 5,000. He shook his head at the memory of that foolish confidence. Within 2 weeks, our garrison was down to less than 1,000. The humans attacked at night, during storms, from underground tunnels we did not know existed. They destroyed our supply depots and communication centers. They turned our own weapons against us. Keth Voran described the final battle where his unit was surrounded. They had been trying to retreat to the main base when human forces cut them off. The fighting lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, Keth Voran was the only one still alive, and barely so. I had been hit by debris when a wall collapsed, he said. My legs were trapped under heavy stones. I had broken bones and internal bleeding. I could not move. I lay there in the ruins, listening to the sounds of battle fade away, waiting to die. The cadets listened in complete silence. Night came. The temperature dropped. I drifted in and out of consciousness. I thought about my family back home, about my training, about all the things I would never do. I made peace with my death. Keth Voran paused and took a slow breath. Then I heard footsteps. Someone was moving through the rubble near me. I assumed it was a human soldier coming to finish off any survivors. I prepared myself for the end. He looked at the cadets with an expression they had not seen before. Not fear or anger, but something like wonder. A light appeared above me. A human stood there, looking down at where I lay trapped. It was a woman in a medical uniform. Her name, I learned later, was Amy Nelson. She was a field medic attached to the human assault force. Keth Voran described how Amy had studied his injuries with a small scanner. Her face had shown no hatred, no satisfaction at seeing an enemy soldier suffering. She had looked at him the same way a doctor would look at any patient. She did not kill me, he said. Instead, she began to work. She called for help, and 2 other humans came. They lifted the stones off my legs. They stopped my bleeding. They gave me medicine for the pain. All of this for an enemy soldier who had come to their world to conquer them. Cadet Yira's eyes were wide. Why would she do that? She asked. Keth Voran smiled sadly. I asked her the same question. I could barely speak, but I managed to ask why she was helping me. Do you know what she said? The cadets waited. She said, "Because you are hurt, and I can help." Keth Voran let those simple words fill the lecture hall. That was all. No politics. No strategy. No calculation of whether I might be useful as a prisoner. She helped me because I was a wounded creature and she had the ability to ease my suffering. That was enough reason for her. He walked slowly back to the podium and gripped it with both hands. I have thought about that moment every day for 40 years. At first, I was grateful. I believed Amy was simply a kind individual, different from the warriors who had killed so many of my comrades. But as time passed, I began to understand something deeper. Keth Voran's voice grew quieter. Amy was not an exception. She was an example. Humans are capable of tremendous violence, but they are also capable of tremendous compassion. The same species that hunted us through the dark corridors of Mira 7 also risked their lives to save wounded enemies. He looked at the cadets with intensity. Do you understand what that means? It means every act of human violence is a choice. They could choose mercy at any moment. When they fight, when they kill, it is not because they cannot help themselves. It is because they have decided that fighting is necessary. Keth Voran remembered lying in that field hospital, surrounded by human medical staff who treated him with professional care. He had watched them move from patient to patient, human and alien alike, giving the same attention to everyone. It had confused him deeply. Amy came to see me before I was transferred to a prisoner exchange program. She sat beside my bed and talked to me about her life. She had a family back on Earth. She had wanted to be a veterinarian, someone who heals animals. But the war had changed her plans. She missed her home, her parents, her pet dog. She was just a person, caught up in events larger than herself. He paused. Before she left, she gave me a warning. She told me to pass a message to my commanders. She said, "Tell your leaders to stop this war. Tell them to negotiate peace while they still can, because if they do not, there will be no one left to surrender." Kethvoran's voice grew heavy. I did not understand what she meant then. I thought it was an empty threat, the kind of thing soldiers say to discourage their enemies. But Amy was not threatening me. She was warning me. She knew what her people were capable of when pushed too far. He stepped away from the podium. That experience haunts me more than any battle I survived. The humans who showed me mercy were the same humans who had killed my friends without hesitation. They could switch between kindness and violence as easily as changing clothes. And that duality, that ability to be both gentle and terrible, makes them more frightening than any purely aggressive species could ever be. Kethvoran looked at the cadets one by one. A simple monster is predictable. You know it will attack, and you can prepare for that. But humans are not simple monsters. They are complex beings who make moral choices in every situation. When they fight you, they have decided that you deserve to be fought. When they show mercy, they have decided that you deserve mercy. And you will never know which choice they will make until the moment comes. He returned to the center of the stage. I passed Amy's warning to my commanders. They ignored it. They believed the war was still winnable. They could not imagine that the humans would become more dangerous than they had already shown themselves to be. Kethvoran's expression grew dark. They were wrong. The humans had been holding back. Everything we had faced so far was just the beginning, and when they finally decided to stop restraining themselves, the coalition learned the true meaning of human warfare. He picked up his cane from where he had left it. Tomorrow I will tell you about the human counteroffensive. I will tell you about the power they unleashed when they stopped showing mercy. And you will understand why the coalition surrendered unconditionally to a species we had dismissed as insignificant. The cadets sat in heavy silence as the old veteran walked away. They had learned something important today. Humanity's capacity for kindness made their capacity for violence even more terrifying, because it meant they always had a choice, and sometimes they chose war. On the final day of lectures, every seat in the hall was filled. Cadets stood in the aisles and crowded near the doors. Even instructors and senior officers had come to hear the veterans' conclusion. Word had spread throughout the academy, and everyone wanted to know how the story ended. Kethvoran entered slowly, his cane tapping against the floor with each step. He looked older today, as if telling these stories had drained something vital from him, but his eyes were sharp, and his voice was steady when he began to speak. I told you about Amy Nelson's warning, he said. She told me to ask my leaders to negotiate peace while they still could. They refused. They believed the coalition's superior numbers would eventually crush human resistance. They did not understand what was coming. He walked to the center of the stage. For 3 years, the humans had been fighting defensively. They protected their colonies, ambushed our forces, and made us pay dearly for every small victory. But they had not truly attacked us. They had not brought the war to our worlds. That changed in the 4th year. Kethvoran activated the holographic display. A map appeared showing coalition territory, with human space as a small blue region on the edge. The humans called it Operation Reckoning. In a single coordinated strike, they attacked 17 major coalition military installations across 9 systems. They did not warn us. They did not demand surrender. They simply appeared and began destroying everything. Red marks bloomed across the map, showing the targets of the human assault. Our admirals could not believe the reports they were receiving. Human fleets were appearing in systems they should not have been able to reach. They were using jump points we did not know existed. Paths through space that our own scientists had declared impossible. He shook his head at the memory. We learned later that the humans had spent 50 years secretly mapping these hidden routes. Long before the war began, they had been preparing for the possibility of conflict. They knew they were smaller and weaker than the other powers in the galaxy. So they prepared. The cadets stared at the map with growing unease. The red marks were spreading like a disease. In the first week of Operation Reckoning, the Coalition lost more ships than in the previous 3 years combined. Human strike forces hit our shipyards, fuel depots, and communication relays. They did not try to capture these targets. They simply destroyed them and moved on to the next one. HFY changed the display to show footage from the war. Coalition ships burning in space, stations breaking apart, escape pods drifting among the wreckage. The humans had developed new weapons for this offensive. They called them kinetic accelerators. Simple metal rods accelerated to enormous speeds. No explosives needed. Just mass and velocity. A single rod the size of a person could punch through the strongest armor we possessed. He paused to let the cadets absorb this information. But the weapons were not the most frightening part. The frightening part was the humans themselves. They fought with a fury we had never seen before. Not the cold efficiency of Mira 7, not the clever ambushes of New Cyprus. This was something different. This was anger. HFY's voice grew quiet. For 3 years, the humans had watched their families die. They had seen their homes destroyed. They had buried their children and mourned their friends. They had contained their rage, channeled it into discipline and planning. But now they let it loose. He looked at the cadets with haunted eyes. Human soldiers painted messages on their weapons. Names of fallen loved ones. Names of destroyed colonies. They wrote the messages in their own blood. Before each battle, they would read these names aloud, reminding themselves why they fought. The sound of thousands of humans chanting the names of their dead was more terrifying than any war cry. A Drethkai cadet in the front row spoke up. Surely the Coalition fought back. We must have won some battles. We did, HFY admitted. Here and there, our forces managed to stop human advances. But it did not matter. The humans were not trying to conquer us. They were not trying to capture territory or resources. They were trying to break our will to fight, and in that goal, they succeeded completely. He changed the display again, showing a once beautiful world, now scarred with the marks of orbital bombardment. This is Kelvor Prime. It was a military training world, home to several major academies like this one. The humans did not invade it. They did not even land troops. They simply used their kinetic weapons to destroy every military installation from orbit. When they finished, they broadcast a message to the survivors. We could do the same to your civilian cities. Remember that. The cadets stared at the ruined world in horror. The humans never attacked civilian targets, HFY said. They made it clear that they had the ability but chose not to use it. Every destroyed military base was a reminder that they could do so much worse if they wanted to. That restraint was itself a form of psychological warfare. He turned off the display and stood in silence for a moment. Within 1 standard year, the Coalition High Command requested peace negotiations. The humans accepted immediately. They did not demand territory. They did not demand money or resources. They demanded only 3 things: recognition of their sovereignty, freedom for all human prisoners, and a promise that the Coalition would never attack human space again. HFY looked at the stunned faces before him. Many of our leaders wanted to reject these terms. They said the Coalition could rebuild, could develop new weapons, could eventually overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers, but the military commanders refused. They had seen what the humans could do. They knew that continued war would mean the destruction of the Coalition itself. He picked up his cane and walked slowly across the stage. The war ended. Peace was signed, and the humans went back to their quiet corner of the galaxy. They reopened trade. They shared their art and music and culture. They became the peaceful partners you know today. HFY stopped and turned to face the cadets one last time. But never forget what I have told you. The humans you meet at trading posts and diplomatic functions are the same humans who broke the Coalition's military power in a single year. They are the same humans who chanted the names of their dead before battle. They are the same humans who showed me mercy when they could have let me die. His voice grew heavy with the weight of his memories. The power that humans can unleash is not their technology or their tactics. It is their unity. When humans face a common threat, they become something greater than individuals. They become a single organism with billions of cells, all thinking together, all fighting together, all willing to die together. That power cannot be measured in ships or soldiers. It can only be experienced. And if you are their enemy when they unleash it, you will not survive. Kethvoran walked to the edge of the stage. I was asked to come here and teach you about human warfare. I have done my best. But the most important lesson I can give you is this. Do everything in your power to remain friends with the humans. Trade with them. Learn from them. Appreciate the beauty they create, because the alternative is to become their enemy. And no species in the history of this galaxy has survived being humanity's true enemy. He bowed his head slightly. The humans have a saying. They say, "We come in peace. We always mean it. But if you force us to come in war, you will wish you had accepted the peace." Kethvoran turned and walked slowly toward the exit. The cadets rose to their feet in silence, a gesture of respect that he had not asked for but had certainly earned. At the door, he paused and looked back one more time. "Be grateful for the peace," he said, "and pray it lasts forever." Then he was gone, leaving behind a lecture hall full of young soldiers who finally understood why their elders spoke of humans with such quiet fear. The stories of the Terran contact wars were not exaggerations or propaganda. They were warnings, and those warnings would echo in the minds of every cadet who heard them for the rest of their lives.